You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name's Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we talk to innovators in this space every week. Ivan, why don't you go ahead and introduce today's guest?
Hi, my name is Ivan Zach, and we have Dr. Barry MacEachern visiting us today. What we know about Barry is that he graduated from Atlantic Vet College, just like I did, a couple years before me. And he used to be a chief veterinarian with Hope for Wildlife and former president of Nova Scotia Veterinary Medical Association. He's the owner of the Burnside Animal Hospital. Welcome to our show, Barry. How are you?
Good. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here, Barry. You're our first Nova Scotian on the show, and I'm not sure if our listeners know that, but I'm in Nova Scotia, and Ivan's one province over, so you're the first Atlantic Canadian for us to have on the show.
Oh, that's great.
So we had recently Dr. Cote on the show here. I don't know if he was a professor when you were there. What were the highlights of ABC that you remember? I certainly have. I don't know if you're originally from Cape Breton, but I certainly have good memories about PI. That's why I moved back from Toronto to New Brunswick, a little closer to Atlantic Canada.
I'm from Cape Breton, so my memories of ABC, well, Dr. Cote was not there at my time. Although I've listened to him speak at different conferences. Lynn O'Sullivan, who is now one of the cardiologists at ABC, she was a classmate of mine, also a maritimer. You know, I had a good experience at ABC. It was a great 4 years, made a lot of friends who I've stayed in contact with. My path, didn't necessarily go the way I had planned. I went to ABC thinking I wanted to be a large animal vet, and within my first year being there, decided dogs and cats were the way to go. And so kind of changed my path a little bit. But, being a smaller school, there was 50 of us in the class. So we got to know each other quite well. We got to know the professors quite well. And I thought they gave us a really good education.
Yeah, I love that school. I think we had 60 people. And at that time, I think that 54, maybe 50 were girls at that time. So profession is changing.
Just before we move off of that, can you share a quick version of your arrival to Canada and ABC?
Are you referring to something specific?
Yeah, absolutely. Your trip on the plane, I believe it was, and your accommodations that you had all lined up when you arrived.
Well, I don't think the show about me, but it's an interesting story. So I was for a year in Canada by that time. We just immigrated, as a family. I had my veterinary degree almost completed in Ukraine, so therefore I worked cleaning hospitals in Toronto. That's all that qualified for. And then by a combination of multiple flukes, I was admitted to vet college on PI. And on my way there, I was chit-chatting with a lady from PI, and she saw me looking for apartments in newspaper, and she said, why don't we give you a lift from the airport because my husband is meeting me, which was unusual for me being from Ukraine and Toronto. So they picked me up. And then she said to her husband, Ivan just got into the vet school looking for an apartment and needs a lift to university. And then her husband casually says, oh, we're staying in our cottage. Why don't you stay in our house until you find an apartment? Just handed me the keys, and I stayed downtown Charlottetown for the next 2 weeks in a completely stranger's house. And they told me there's an oil tank in the back. Put the keys under the oil tank and the magnet. That was my introduction to Maritimes, and that's definitely my experience going forward. That's why I moved here. So thanks for letting me tell that story, Shawn. But yeah,
the reason I brought it up is because Dr. Barry, I'm sure you can relate to that as a maritimer, as a Cape Bretoner, the hospitality that exists in this part of the world. Since we were talking about the Maritimes, I just couldn't help myself but bring that up. It makes me proud to be a maritimer and to be surrounded by people like that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that was a pretty amazing story. Mine isn't quite as exciting, but it was kind of similar. When I got into vet school, a friend of mine who went to the agricultural college in Truro, her and I decided to get an apartment together. And when we went over apartment hunting, it was Old Home Week, which we didn't figure on. And so when we got to Charlottetown, all the hotels were full. And we were having a really hard time finding a place to stay just for the night. And we called a bed and breakfast, which happened to be a dairy farm. They were full, but they did have spare rooms that their kids normally stayed in. And so they welcomed us in, like once they found out we were over apartment hunting because we had gotten into vet school. We ended up staying on a dairy farm, which was a bed and breakfast for the night to find our first apartment.
Wow.
So yeah, they certainly are friendly.
So I think we should probably reach out to the vet college and start selling advertising on the podcast, Ivan.
Yeah. So TV show, how does one become a vet and then ends up with a TV show? Can you tell us about it?
Oh, that was kind of a little bit of a surreal story. I had never thought I'd want to be on TV. It was never part of my plan. I used to be a rather private person, although that's kind of gone by the wayside now because I get recognized places. But it just kind of happened. I was doing Hope for Wildlife. I was the vet going out to the rehab, treating the animals. And just one day I went out to check on the deer, and there happened to be some cameras there. And I kind of asked what they were for, and they told me it was just a documentary. I believed them. And I think in the beginning, Hope for Wildlife was just going to be a documentary. It wasn't going to be a TV show like it turned out to be. You know, each time I went out, because I used to go out once a week, I had Wednesdays off at the time, and I'd spend my Wednesdays at the rehab. They were always there, but they were kind of like flies on the wall. You didn't really know the camera was in front of you. It's a great film crew, and they know what they're doing. So it went on a few weeks, and it wasn't until maybe a couple of months went by when finally they said, you know, we've got some really good footage here. We're going to make this into a mini series. It's not going to be a documentary. And I was like, oh, okay, well, okay, whatever. And then it wasn't until a year went by, actually, that I actually saw the first show and kind of realized the gravity of it. The first show, you know, with the opening sequence, them, you know, going through everything, all the footage they had of us, and what they have like 13 episodes per season. And it truly wasn't until the first year that I knew it was a TV show. Now, at that point, we had no idea who was going to watch it. We didn't know if it was going to be a hit. It wasn't until it kind of hit the airwaves and we realized, hey, people enjoy this. People are watching it. That I guess I realized I was too far in to really back out is kind of how it happened.
It sounds like they did a hell of a sales job on you.
There was no sales job. Like, I don't even remember first season signing anything, saying, hey, yeah, you can use my footage. I probably did sign something the first year, but I don't really remember any of that. It wasn't, and the way TV works is, you know, they put all the footage together, but then it can be months before anything's actually put together and edited. And then it can be even months longer before broadcasters show anything. So, you know, the first time I was taped, it was probably almost 2 years before anything went to air. And there's a lot of downtime in between when, yeah, the film crews are still there because they're getting footage in case they use it in the future. But there's really no talk of this is a TV show. In fact, when we were filming, that was never on our minds. It was never, oh, make sure you get this. This will be good for TV. It was, we went away about our daily business. Because I only went out once a week, there was a lot of animals to see, and we didn't have time to be filming things over again. And so it was made very clear from the get-go that I'm just going to come out, I'm going to do what I need to get done. And if you guys want to get images, you have to get them as we go. It wasn't until the series kind of went on, maybe, you know, season 3 or 4, that then they started sitting us down after the fact, talking about the previous episodes. So they already had their idea together of what the show was going to be about, and they'd sit us down and we'd talk about what we were doing. So you can really see how the show evolved over time.
Seems like it started off as a passion, something you enjoyed doing, and then all of a sudden you were the star of a TV show.
That's exactly right. I mean, I really enjoyed doing wildlife. It was something I hadn't really planned on doing. Going through vet school, I wasn't part of the wildlife club. You know, I was focused on doing dogs and cats. I got out, you know, I practiced for a while in Ontario, then moved home, practiced emergency for a while. And it wasn't until I started at the particular clinic where Hope worked that I started doing wildlife. And then I just kind of took it over. I started being the only vet doing wildlife at the clinic. And then because I had Wednesdays off, I started going out to the rehab because I enjoyed doing the wildlife side of it. You know, if we go back 15 years ago, there weren't that many people doing wildlife. I mean, there are more now doing it, but at that point, very few people, number one, felt that they had the knowledge to do wildlife. Number two, had the interest in doing wildlife. And number three, had the time to do wildlife. I just happened to be in a unique situation where I worked 3 12-hour days a week. And so I had the time to do it. I had the interest in doing it. I won't say I had the knowledge to do it. I truly learned as I went.
That's a true specialty that is pretty hard because there's not many specialization in the school that you do for that, especially in handling and, the differences between the species, and because you can get anything. That's, sort of like an emergency medicine. So at that time, did you own the practice, or it was after that you started your practice?
No, I was an associate. I worked somewhere else. I opened my own practice just 5 years ago. It'll be 5 years this month since I opened my own.
Congratulations. So did that have any impact, the show, on your practice? Do you recycle the material? Do you have a big sign as seen on TV? Or how did that impact your professional career?
I knew I always wanted to open my own practice. That was never a question in my mind. From the time before I went to vet school, I said I wanted to own my own practice. And in some ways, maybe doing Hope for Wildlife slowed down the process of opening my own practice, because I truly enjoyed doing the wildlife, and the job as an associate allowed me to do wildlife. We traveled a lot with the show. We went to Costa Rica, we went all over the US, across Canada to Europe. And if I owned my own practice, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So in some ways, it slowed down the process of opening my own practice. But then when the time came to open my practice, I think it gave me a huge boost. By then, the show had been airing for a few years. My name was out there. People knew who Dr. Barry was. And so from the time I opened right up until now, we've been busy. There's never been a downtime. The show did definitely give the clinic a boost in starting. So although it may have delayed my timing in opening, I don't think it slowed down the progress any.
Excellent. And then so from the show, were you able to, through this, fund your hospital when you started it? Was this a successful sort of exit out of the show? How did that look like?
Financially wise, for me, there was not a lot of money from doing the TV show, which surprises a lot of people. The first few years of Hope for Wildlife, I didn't get paid anything because I was doing the work anyway. And I had said, you know what? Any funds that would have went my way, donate back into Hope for Wildlife. Wow. So there was no money for me because I honestly, truly enjoyed doing it. And the experiences I got to have and travel, around the world doing wildlife, there's not many people that can say they had those experiences and the fun we had doing it. It wasn't until maybe season 5, 6, 7 that I did start getting an honorarium. It still wasn't a lot of money. It certainly didn't fund my new vet clinic in any way. And in fact, when I opened my new clinic, I still was doing Hope for Wildlife, and our hope was that I would continue to do Hope for Wildlife. Just things changed. I opened and we became extremely busy with dogs and cats and, pets. And so there was a transition year of me trying to do both. I couldn't do a good job at both. I couldn't keep up with running a practice, seeing patients, and seeing wildlife patients. So after the first year of trying to do that is when I stepped back from Hope for Wildlife, and Hope for Wildlife hired a full-time vet.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We talk a lot about innovation on this show, and sometimes being innovative is just a matter of, looking at time management and making hard decisions. It must have been a pretty hard decision, especially it sounds like it was such a labor of love, but then you had this business that you had to run at the same time. And I'm sure that decision wasn't necessarily one of the easiest ones.
No, it was a tough decision, but I just kind of had to sit down and say, what was my dream? And my dream was to have, my own clinic, treating dogs and cats and seeing patients and getting to know owners, because I enjoy seeing people. I might be one of the very few veterinarians that actually enjoys people, but I do like the pets and the people that care for them. And so in the end, it came down to what was my dream, and wildlife was a great 10 years, but it wasn't part of my dream. So that's where ultimately my decision came from.
I think the reason that we wanted you on the podcast is to really understand these different types of media, television being one of them. Everyone has some sort of a camera right now, but a lot of veterinary clinics aren't really taking advantage of video and video content marketing. if a veterinarian team out there that's listening to us wants to start filming and producing content, what have you learned as a TV show that's on air about being around a camera crew? Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I don't think I've taken full advantage of the TV show and my name being out there on the TV. And I do realize that I should be taking more advantage of the publicity that I'm getting in order to build the practice. And that's a downfall. It's a time management thing, trying to figure out how to monopolize or how to capitalize on the TV shows. Now, if you're thinking of doing digital media or videos for the show, things that I've learned, number one is you need to truly trust the people that are filming you. You have to get to know the people that are filming you, and they need to be able to read your next move sometimes. Trust goes a long way, because we all know in vet clinics, things don't always go the way that we hoped or planned for. And so you got to be careful sometimes that things don't show up on TV that you didn't intend. And so having trust in the film crew, making sure that you have final say. For my own TV show, the Dr. Barry Show, that was written right in the contract that I have final say of anything that goes on air, and I get to watch the shows before they go on air. So I can veto or ex-nay anything that I see that I don't like, because you always want to portray yourself in the best light, obviously. Also having a story, what are you actually trying to portray here? So there needs to be a story. And then always being aware of what's going on in the background, because that's the biggest thing when I watch the rough cuts, is seeing what people are doing in the background on the video. They may be filming me and the animal I'm with, but what's the rest of the staff doing in the background? How do things look around the clinic? Are things neat and tidy? Because that's what viewers are. There's a lot of viewers out there that are watching those things as well.
Interesting. So transitioning from the TV show into the clinic, you've built it from the ground up. Was it the new build? Was it de novo, or did you acquire it from a previous owner?
No, I built it from the ground up. Well, I leased a space and I renovated the space and fitted it for a vet clinic. So it was a fresh start, 0 clients opening. Really just kind of did it on a shoestring. It was myself and my husband and a veterinary technician that kind of planned the floor plan, did all the ordering, got everything together for it.
So how was that experience from, what were the challenges? Because right now, the industry is consolidating. There's so many of these big consolidators. So every time you make a decision of building a clinic, that's, it's quite a challenge and seeing how we can compete against these giants. What was the most challenging part in designing and building it up with a small crew that you just mentioned?
Oh, I guess I had it really easy. There were no major challenges for me. And I think that was one place that the TV show opened the door for me. I knew when I opened I was going to have clientele, because I had people contacting me on Facebook. I, of course, started a Facebook page early on. I attended the Hope for Wildlife open house, and I had a booth saying I would be opening within the next few months. If you want to become a client, leave your name and your number. And we had pages and pages of people that wanted to be clients. And so by the time we opened, my appointment book was full. And I was working 12-hour days, 5 days a week, plus a couple hours on Saturday. Within 6 months, I was up to an associate vet full-time. Within a year, I was up to, there was 3 of us, 3 vets working full-time. And so it grew really fast. I found I got respect from all the distributors or, the different reps, because they knew me through Hope for Wildlife. Because, of course, when I did Hope for Wildlife, I was always contacting, the different drug companies looking for donations of drugs to treat the wildlife. So they all knew who I was. And so when I opened my own clinic, they kind of knew, okay, well, it's Barry calling us. Okay, what can we do for him? I had a good working relationship with them. It was more of a timing thing when I opened, because I did do it really fast. So waiting for the cages to arrive, the first day we opened, the cages weren't installed yet, because things just didn't get delivered on time. And that was really, I think, the biggest stress that we had when we opened, was that. And of course, learning a new computer software, but everything kind of fell into place. I picked a team when I opened that had a lot of experience, which comes with its pros and its cons. The receptionist I hired had many years experience. I hired 3 seasoned veterinary technicians, and then it was myself. And of course, my husband, who was in the office. And so when we opened, we all knew we had a job to do, and we knew what that job was. We didn't take on any new staff. The downfall of doing that was my payroll was high when I opened because I had hired seasoned technicians.
Mm-hmm. But it sounds like with the pre-sale that you made through your Facebook channel, you filled up the schedule really well. So that sounds amazing, because that's in any sort of product build or business, that's the essential part, to have the clients come when you were there. So that's great.
I think one of the downfalls that I have encountered, but it's been more over time, is because of the TV show, it is hard to build the practice at this point because people want to see me. They're calling to book an appointment with Dr. Barry.
Wow.
And, I have 2 associates, and sometimes you can't get them to book with the associates. They stay at the clinic they're at because they only want to see Dr. Barry because he was the one on TV. And that's been the challenge that we've been trying to get over. Of course, some of them do book in with the associates, and that's great, but I can only see so many people in the run of a day. And so that is the hurdle we're trying to get over right now. We're hoping that because of the Dr. Barry show, every episode, one of my associates also has a story on the episode. So we're hoping people are seeing them, and we'll start calling to book with them as well.
It's really interesting. You're digging out all of these innovative things. Facebook, introducing your other associates on the TV show. These are some pretty interesting marketing tactics, I would say, Barry, that I think will probably pay dividends for you guys as you go forward, because it's all about the team, isn't it? You started with, a team that was seasoned, and it sounds like you've built a practice with some great associates. One man never built a village by himself, I don't think.
No, and that is the hurdle we're trying to get over now, because it did become, I did make mistakes along the way. I mean, when I opened, although the clinic's called Burnside Veterinary Hospital, all my paperwork, my sign says Dr. Barry's Burnside Veterinary Hospital, because I wanted people to know that that's where Dr. Barry is at. And that certainly did help at first, because I'm on a main drag in the industrial park. And people would say, oh, we saw the sign, Dr. Barry, is that the guy from TV? And they'd come in and they'd book. The problem we're having now, though, is it says Dr. Barry on the sign. And I kind of, looking back, wonder if that was a wise move or not. If it should have just been Burnside Veterinary Hospital. It helped me grow fast, but that may be one of the challenges with getting people to book with the associate.
You're the classic entrepreneur, Dr. Barry, just making mistakes along the way and still there. I think that's always the big testament to an entrepreneur. A classic business person is, we make a ton of mistakes. My God, we could do a show, me and Ivan, just of mistakes that we've made, and it'd probably be not a 20-hour episode, but my section would be a couple of hours long.
And I think it's okay to make mistakes as long as you recognize them and figure out how to alter the course. And that's kind of where we're at now. The past 5 years have been extremely busy and a little bit crazy, because I am trying to manage the practice, still seeing, 40 hours a week of appointments on top of that. And then also trying to figure out, how do we market this differently? What do we do differently? And so the mistakes that were made are fine. Now it's to sit down and figure out, how do we alter it so the mistake actually turns into a positive thing? And that will work out for us. We're still looking at that. And like I said, on the TV show, my associates are front and center. My technicians all have a part in it. They try and make sure in every episode that all the staff is seen and spoken to.
Thanks so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. We're pretty social people, so you'll find us on every social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at theveterinaryiinnovationpodcast.com. Thanks so much for listening.